Arlington Heights School District 25 School Board meeting in session. We're currently already have a motion to be in open session. So, Madam Secretary, if you'll note the attendance, we'll go right to the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, good evening. Oh, we don't have any recognition.
Nope, not today.
That's too bad. We'll save that for August. I'm sure we'll have some. All right, let's move right into board member updates, beginning with Rich and or Stacy for Ed Red.
This is a new setup here. Just maybe two things to talk about. One, something we've talked about it overall with the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece, because one of the key areas was key that it's diversity for everyone and equity for everyone, inclusion into everyone. And so what's happened recently over the last several months is a lot more lawsuits are bringing up, because what they're saying is that if you're trying to be diverse in a specific area or identifying a specific group, you are no longer diverse. And therefore, you're actually against your whole diversity, equity, inclusion. So several universities have been hit with those types of areas. The U.S. government has been hit with lawsuits. AT&T just lost a lawsuit for $10 million. Same thing, they had a DEI initiative, and we're going about it the wrong way. So it's just something for us to be mindful of as we look at it. And as we've talked about, it's diversity, equity, inclusion means diversity, equity, inclusion for all. So the second thing, for Ed Red in general, we're starting up our programs, but of a unfortunate note, the superintendent of Ed Red, Dr. Kelly Roberts, as you guys recall, the Highland Park incident, was actually shot during that particular incident, along with her 8-year-old son, Cooper. So they're recuperating, but that's just an unfortunate event, you know, happenstance, bad spot, or bad timing in that situation. That's all I have.
Mr. Vice President, I just want to add one little bit from Ed Red. I had the opportunity to attend one of their series of seminars on SEL, and the one I saw was it was really informative. The first half or so was services from ISBE, and it was great as a board member to understand the range of services, how they work with districts, and then they had I don't believe it was their superintendent, but from Evanston School District there, talking about things they were doing in their district and how they were putting SEL into practice in a daily way in their district. So they do have one more webinar coming up later in August, so recommend it.
All right, thank you, Greg.
Notice on the agenda, it's supposed to be before the pledge of allegiance, the roll call. Can you do that?
Yes, I asked Madam Secretary to note the roll verbally, but there's no direct questions from the audience. Thank you. All right, moving on. I'll come back to him at the end. Yeah. IASB, Anisha is not here this evening. Greg, do you have an update for IASB?
I do not this evening. Thank you.
All righty. Next is Nssco, Scott and Regina.
I have some good news, bad news, kind of. Bad news starting off is that Dr. Judy Hackett is retiring after 40-some years in special education. So that is going to put the board to work to find a superintendent that can carry that torch as bright as she carried it. She's done great work, as we all talked about in the last couple of years with Nssco. At least my time on the board, I've seen wonderful things. So it's going to be an exciting year. She's planning on going out with a bang. So stay tuned on these updates here. The good news, bingo night to support Nssco, and I'll pass these down. This is in October 12th, so we'll have a couple more meetings to kind of remind you to go, but This is a bingo raffle and silent auction to support NSSCO. In years past, they've raised up to $30,000 to benefit NSSCO programs such as PERC, which is the Parent Educational Resource Center, and sensory rooms. So it's a great night for a great cause. Additionally, I added a second. It's a wellness walk on September 19th. That's from 3:30 to 5:30, and that is at Kirk School. This is their wellness initiative for staff, but board members from across participating districts have been invited to participate as well. So 2 great events to support the NSSCO community. And like I said, I will be reminding you in upcoming months, because I imagine this bingo night's going to be a lot of fun. So hope to see everyone there.
All right, thank you, Scott. And then do we have any general board member updates?
Mr. Vice President.
Yes.
I just wanted to share, last Thursday, the opportunity to attend the summer band concert, which was kind of the finale for the summer band program here in District 25. And what an amazing event. I knew there was summer band here. I already knew that going in, but I walked into a very packed gym at Thomas and learned that the program is really a collaboration from both sides of the district. So the band program here based out of Thomas and then based out of South, they come together. So kids across the district are playing together, and they had 2 very large bands, and again, a lot of audience there, and they just played really fun, energizing tunes. And man, just kudos to everyone there, the staff, the faculty, and the kids, and the parents for supporting it, because it was just a fun way to end their time in that band program for the summer. And I think they're really excited about playing this year. So what a great event.
Yes, well, thanks.
Do you want to talk about being a peer teacher?
Thank you for reminding me, Dr. Bine. I also, had the opportunity to attend the new teacher welcome yesterday. And that, boy, it's a special moment when a teacher's coming into a district. And I have to say that, our staff here all really lay it out so wonderfully and welcome these new teachers in. And I mean, I'm a teacher as well, so to be able to come in and see how this district does it was a real treat for me, and really excited for those new teachers, right, to join our district. And I also got to see Dr. Bine speak at the beginning, which was also a really cool experience. So just a great welcome from the district, and I was glad I was able to see it.
Well, thank you for being there on our behalf to welcome. I was unable to attend myself. I normally share your enthusiasm for that event. I do try to make that every year, but I had a work function. So, all right, any other updates from board members? All right, let's move on to community input. All right, thank you. All right, so before we have community input, just a little bit of our policy here. The opportunity to speak to the board is provided for members of the public who have a comment to make about the business of the board. The board appreciates hearing from stakeholders and values your thoughts and questions. As the board strives to make the best decisions for the district, public input can be helpful. In order for the board to reserve sufficient time to conduct its business and to operate this meeting in the spirit of civility and decorum, speakers are expected to follow the following guidelines. Address the board only at the time provided on the agenda and only after being recognized by the board president. Identify yourself and be brief. Your comments must be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes, and the board may shorten this allowed time in order to conserve time to allow the maximum number of people in the community to speak. Third, please be respectful and courteous, as the board requests that you may not make statements that are personally disrespectful or condescending to board members or school staff. The board typically does not respond to comments or attempt to answer questions during this portion of the meeting, but we do listen intently and appreciate the input from our community. All right. First is Karen Smith.
I've lived in the village since 1971. And I had 3 kids go through the school without going to full-time kindergarten. They went to college, got master's degrees, and I am paying, last year I paid $3,813.60 to School District 25. And now you're going to put this referendum on my tax bill for something that is a luxury. It's not a necessity. In the past, we've closed schools, we've rented out schools. There was poor judgment for those things, and I think this is a very poor judgment for this referendum. There are many seniors in Arlington Heights who are on fixed incomes, and they should not be paying for a luxury when parents should pay for their own child care, not the citizens. You're wasting our tax dollars. That's my opinion, and I hope you'll reconsider how you're spending our money.
All right, thank you, Karen. Sheila Cruz.
The referendum narrowly passed with less than a 1% difference. Half the voters said no to the all-day kinder care scheme. And more importantly, but surprisingly, they said no to the $30 million of that $75 million that was earmarked for repairs that Ryan Schultz identified as life safety issues. We voted no because the district had plenty of opportunity to make repairs and add classrooms over the recent years, especially recent at Ivy Hill, Olive, Greenbrier, Thomas, just to name a few. We voted no because family size averages 3 to 4 persons per household, and building out the schools is unnecessary, unwarranted, and wasteful. Furthermore, the demographic study recommended against a kinder care program because District 25 enrollment is declining. A kinder care program in this area declining when you have not even piloted a full-day kinder care program, and because we are also living in unsteady times. We voted no because the public opinion survey overwhelmingly said if you offer this program, parents should pay, not the taxpayers. We voted no because the number of low-income families needing all-day care for their 5-year-old simply does not add up to taxing all District 25 residents for $75 million. The few families that need kinder care have options for assistance. We voted no because we are in a recession and having to tighten our belts and decide on necessities, not on what we want. We expect our taxing bodies to do the same. Kindergarten is optional. It's not mandatory grade like 1st through 12th. We don't approve of optional spending. I'm asking on behalf of the no voters that the district do the prudent and moral thing at this time. Fix the buildings that need to be fixed and leave the all-day kinder care out. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Joanne Carroll.
Good evening. I'm really disappointed that Dr. Joji is not here tonight. That's a big disappointment. And I'm hopefully that she will be watching the video and hearing all of our concerns. Possibly a nod. I want to address the entire board and staff of District 25. If this referendum shows and tells you anything, it shows that this village is divided and split. This was a generational, young versus old vote, period. It's a split decision, and obviously a lot of attention was brought to the voters on this huge tax referendum. And I'd make a bet that the majority of the voters, even who voted, did not completely understand the entire referendum. Since you only contacted 150 registered voters on a telephone survey, the wording on the second mailer was definitely changed. The original value of the bonds went from 60 million to 75 million. And in talking with many, many residents that we brought attention to this, the majority of the people, they didn't know all these facts. You should have divided the two issues of the building repair and the all-day kindergarten and made it separate. And I think each and every one of you guys know that. I express my beliefs that you guys rushed through this thing March 17th and to get it on the ballot June 28th. I hope all of you take a second look at this as doing your due diligence to the people who voted yes and the people who voted no. 50%. You thought 2,500 were coming out, Lori. 11,000 showed up. Goes to show you. You need to readjust and rethink the entire project. We've come up with excellent and viable modifications to your plan all spring to show taxpayers that you're listening to their no vote and maybe still consider the yes, but that you're willing to go back to a drawing board since it was so close. And the 4 of you trustees who expressed grave concerns and spoke publicly on it, and it was printed in the Daily Herald, speak louder now. This is something that can and should be recalculated from 75 million, way less money. Knock it down. Come up with a payment plan and scale back the number of classrooms and consolidate. Think about it, guys. What if your parents were fixed income out here? Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Is it Christine? Kriska? Am I saying that right? Help me out here.
Kiska?
Ishka? Christy Kishka? Sorry, I can't. Not good with handwriting, even though I was taught cursive.
Sorry. It's cheeky, like a chicken. I just want to let you know, I've lived in Arlington Heights all my life. My kids went to school here, and they're all grown up. They don't even live in town anymore. But I want to point out that since the tax increase is a percentage, as we are reassessed and the value of our homes increase, so will that dollar amount based on that percentage amount. So it's not going to be, quote unquote, $300 per year for 20 years. It's going to keep creeping up. And I think people need to be aware of that. It might be small, but it all adds up. And seriously, you need to reevaluate your plans for classrooms. Do you really think we need 25 new classrooms? And seriously, if you consider that it was based on studies that is not needed, basically this is what I feel. I'll be dead before you need all these classrooms. And a large portion of us seniors will also be gone. Maybe that will open up homes for new people to move in, and maybe they will or will not choose to have families. So you really need to reconsider what you're doing. I don't think the classrooms are needed. And also, I see no reason why you cannot use some of that capital expenditure to work on the facilities that I know desperately need help, but you have funds available. And we should not have to pay for that because we've been paying for it for years to begin with. So thank you very much.
Thank you. William Boudreau?
Hi. I live at 827 Roosevelt, around the corner from Dryden. And I received this mailer on April 19th announcing that the first meeting was going to be April 12th. So I missed that first one. And then I was going to attend the ones in May. Unfortunately, I'd already made plans to go down to Florida. Anyhow, when I first got this, the first thing I thought was it was tone deaf based upon the economic situation that's going on, with gas at $6 a gallon, et cetera, et cetera. The cost of electricity has now gone up over 50%. Natural gas has gone up over quadrupling. But anyhow, there's nice to have and need to have. Nice to have is full-day kindergarten, but I've been here 20 years. I had 2 kids. We moved here. My kids were older. They didn't need all-day kindergarten. But if that's very important for a parent, there are other communities they can move to. Even looking at I've done a little research, you have 450 kids in kindergarten. Well, even if you do full-day kindergarten, you only need about 11 additional classrooms. You don't need 25. In addition, I don't think the 75 million, it's interesting how someone just announced that it was originally 60 million. Now it's 75 million. So the number's going to keep going up. Inflation's probably gone up double since when this thing was probably first announced back in April. So it's going to be even more expensive. So the costs are going to multiply. But what's interesting is I went to the Cook County. First of all, my faith in elections is really down after 2020. Has nothing to do with Donald Trump, which most people would assume. I'd like to know what Jim Oberweis has to say about mail-in ballots. He was 1,000 votes ahead the day after the election. He ended up losing by over 4,000. How do you make up 5,000 votes? Here we were up 149 with the no votes. We end up losing by 50. What's interesting is if you considered registered voters 36,000 in District 25 as a board of directors, in order to move forward, you need a quorum. Okay? There are 7 members of this board. Less than 30% voted in this election on referendum. I think that was done on purpose because you knew the turnout was going to be low. That's the equivalent of having 2 out of 7 of the board the board members here making a decision. You wouldn't even have a quorum. And when you look at the 50 votes on the 36,800 registered voters, it's 0.13% of the total votes. 450 kindergartners, that's been stable. Your student population has been stable. I only got 3 minutes. So for 50 votes, you're going to ask the community, you're going to say for 450 families, potentially, because you don't know, you're going to burden about 18 to 20,000 families with costs that are nice to have, not necessary. I think you people need to reconsider and reconsider big time because the costs are only going to quadruple or go higher than that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Anita Pacheco?
Good evening. I am a resident of Arlington Heights, but I'm also a 25-year veteran of someone who's worked in marketing and communications, working with nonprofits, national associations, and local municipalities to message and market their missions. My professional assessment of this referendum campaign from someone who has worked on referendum campaigns is that this referendum is a case study in how not to run a referendum campaign. As a resident and as a recent widow, I can honestly say that this campaign has put a black mark on School District 25's reputation, and you've destroyed the public trust, whatever you had. Consider that back to, I'm not going to say square one, but you have hurt your public reputation, online and offline. And this is from a wide spectrum of residents and friends, family, neighbors that I know of in this town. So my professional advice to you is to hire someone that knows what they're doing from a communication standpoint. I asked many times throughout the process and attending your meetings, where was your communication person? I couldn't attend any, when working for local municipalities, I had to attend the referendum and public engagement meetings. It was a requirement. You had no one. And when I asked about it, I was met with almost like disdain and disrespect. I'm disappointed in the communication. I'm disappointed in the fact that you are not recognizing that you won only because a handful of us dipped into our own finances and our own time and energy to rally the troops here in Arlington Heights to understand and be aware of this effort, you would have won this campaign. It would have been under the radar. Had a few of us, many of us in this room, and more, had we not felt it was important enough to stand up against irresponsible local government. It's a disappointment professionally, it's a disappointment personally. And I encourage you to focus on rebuilding whatever public trust you can resurrect after this campaign, and to focus on utilizing the funds that we've given you responsibly. Because based on your track record, I'm not placing my bet. You all are going to be watched very closely, and many of us will be attending board meetings in the future to hold you all accountable. And we will keep raising our voices to keep Arlington Heights a wonderful place to live and to protect the quality of life that many of us enjoy here. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Art Endlingson.
Good evening. I moved to Arlington Heights, bought my house in 1985, moved in the day the racetrack burned down. My children are graduates of Westgate, South, and Rolling Meadows High School. My grandchildren currently all live in another district, not District 25, but they will feed into 214 unless my children decide to move between now and when they enter high school. But I'm very concerned about this community, which is one of the reasons I ran for the school board here 31 years ago, if I remember the math correctly. I think it was in 1991. But we have here a situation where the vote is a virtual tie. There's a 50-vote difference in this. 50 votes divide the winners and the losers. That is a virtual dead heat. We also have a situation where interest rates have gone up since this was proposed. By the time you sell bonds, if you continue to press forward and do it, interest rates will probably have doubled, if not tripled, from last March. Building costs are going up. My home insurance rates went up, and they tell me because building materials have gone up significantly in the last year. So it costs 3-4 times more for building materials than it did a year ago or 2 years ago. All of this will add tremendous cost to the project if you pursue what you're planning to do. So I hope you will stop the plan and go backwards and just remodel what needs to be done, the health and safety, the electric systems, the air conditioning, the fire control systems, and not build the extra classrooms, which are not needed. I also want you to do what several school districts downstate have already done. There are 3 counties, LaSalle County, and I forget the name of the 2 counties adjacent to them to the west, but were the towns of Streeter, Illinois, Ottawa, Illinois, LaSalle, Peru, and a bunch of towns in there. 3 whole counties, every single school district has said, we're not going to participate in the new sex ed laws coming up. The only thing a 5-year-old or a 9-year-old boy needs to know about sex is that girls have cooties. They don't need to know any more than that. I've seen documentary films on what these new sex ed standards will do. I would encourage you to not sell these bonds. I would encourage you to vote out of the sex ed curriculum that was made semi-mandatory by the state. Because the new law in the state says if you teach sex ed, you have to follow these standards. But you can not teach sex ed at all. The parents in this community are quite adequate to teach their children about the birds and the bees. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Next is Roger Berg.
think the thing that disappointed me the most is the lack of respect that was shown to the voters in the referendum. You buried the cost of the school behind maintenance. People see maintenance, they get scared. I don't want anything to happen to the children. Yeah, I guess I'm going to have to vote. But I didn't have an either or. It was either vote for both. And I don't understand why you didn't separate a 20-year plus all of the costs that have to go with that, the salaries, all the maintenance, to a 5-year program. That is a big difference in items. But no, the board decided to put it on one referendum. Take it or leave it. Sadly, not enough left it. Secondly, we didn't hear very much about the costs to run this program. Where is that? Was that published? Is that available? Teachers have to come from somewhere. I don't think I have to tell you there's a critical teacher shortage. And that's a fact. And District 25 is going to need about 25 teachers. 25 teachers for kindergarten. They will not be teaching academics. Trained people that could be teaching academics are going to be in a kindergarten program. What a waste of talent, but yet District 25 wants it. Again, the disrespect you showed to the voters, the lack of choice and freedom is just unbelievable.
Thank you, Roger. All right. All right, let's move on to communications from our district partners, starting with PTA. Nicole? Who's not here. All right. ABC 25. Gina?
Thank you, Mr. President. So for ABC 25 and for the teachers that might be watching tonight and for the ATA, the ABC 25 team is getting ready to kick off our year. We're getting ready to start our grant program. Grants will open up by the end of August, and they will be available for our teachers to be able to submit so that all of the great money that was raised last year through all the fundraising efforts by the foundation can be shared with all of our teachers on their new, innovative, and exciting ways to bring new thinking and new teaching methodologies into District 25. Beyond that, the only other thing we ask for of the parents for registration is to please join ABC 25. Your donation goes directly to the teachers. 100% of it goes to the teachers. The rest of us are all volunteers, so that the teachers can spend this money and use it to improve the classroom experience for all of the children.
Thank you, Gina. All right, from the ATA, do we have Allison Berg?
I wouldn't be me without a slideshow of some kind. So hello, everybody. Good evening. In case you didn't already know this, the teachers in District 25 are some of the very best around. And buildings reopened last week, and teachers were able to come into work in their classrooms if they wanted to. And oh, did they want to. It's like concert tickets for teachers. They're like practically camped out in the parking lots waiting for those buildings to open to get in. So you might wonder, what do teachers do to get ready for a new school year? Why do they rush into their classroom the first chance they get? So I decided to give you a little sneak peek as to just a few of the things that go on behind the scenes. So hang on. Thank you for my amazing slideshow. Airdrop it. these are the things that go on behind the scenes, trying to figure out tech. And actually, my first slide is all about tech. I like the new setup, by the way. At least I can talk and look at my slideshow at the same time instead of looking behind me. I was already thinking today, I'm like, I'm just gonna have to go rogue and stand up so that I can like see the slide and talk at the same time. It's only really good with the pictures. Like really, it really goes together. So I feel like it's not nearly as entertaining without the pictures. It's okay, we got a second, right? Yeah. I actually came into school on the very first day, being one of those teachers. We were allowed to get into school on August 4th, and I thought, maybe no one will be there, but I was wrong. Lots of teachers busy at work already. It's fun to see, and we're all excited for our new school year. Okay, that's cool. I suppose, did anybody talk about Summer U? I was there. I don't have anything prepared on Summer U, but I was a Summer U teacher, and it was a huge success. It was pretty awesome to see. Lots of kids came to Summer U this summer. Lots of fun classes going on. It was wonderful to see so many kids there and so many teachers engaged, and lots of fun activities offered for our kids. Since I was... Okay, I'll come back. Oh yeah, I can sit here.
All right, temporarily, let's move on. We're now at the consent agenda, so it's an action item, I need a motion.
Mr. Vice President.
Who said that? Yes, Greg.
This guy. I move that the Board of Education approve those items on the consent agenda as follows. A, personnel report and addendum to personnel report. B, treasurer's reports for April, May, and June. C, invoices. D, fixed asset disposal report. E, regular and closed session meeting minutes of June 9th, 2022. F, superintendent professional organizations and professional development leave.
Thank you, Greg. Do I have a second?
I got you.
Thank you, Scott. All right, there are no items pulled out or no questions or discussion topics, so we go ahead and take a vote. Lana?
Member Olenichak?
Yes.
Member Cerniglia?
Yes.
Member Scapalato?
Yes.
Member Philippek?
Yes.
Member Faso?
Yes.
Member Conley?
Yes.
Adam, should we keep going?
Keep rolling.
All right, you might want to grab
You can
another
take your
seat.
seat.
I'll come back. You'll call me back.
No worries.
We won't forget about you. When we see the screen change, we'll know. All right, so, on to student learning. Oh, yes, Dr. Fitzpatrick, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm here to present the list of instructional materials for the 22-23 school year, and it's provided to the school board in accordance with Board Policy 6:210. Due diligence has been exercised in selecting materials that meet the needs of our students and are developmentally appropriate. This list reflects core instructional materials. Teachers may, of course, supplement these core resources with various resources when they determine it is in the best interest of their students or classroom. Parents may inspect any textbook or instructional material. This list will be posted on our website moving forward and updated on an annual basis. And that list has been provided to the board ahead of time.
Any questions, comments? Rich, I see the line up.
Yeah, just a quick question. So, just a clarification, because you mentioned core. And I know Lori responded to the core question that we had, but, you know, the policy states all. And so I don't see foreign languages, the health, and maybe even art or something of that nature that's listed on these. So will this be updated to reflect all subject areas as the policy states?
Yeah, sorry, Becky, what we're really doing is changing the format and how we provide this to you, right? Historically, every time there was a curriculum update, the board would review that, the board would vote on that, and those are the materials that we're using, and they continue to be. That continues to be the process. But what we wanted to do to further align with the policy was kind of give you a list every year of what those are. And so starting with these core, we will be updating you on, like you said, world language areas that don't have a consistent resource that's used are areas that we're looking at updating curriculum-wise, and those will come to you as action items for you to approve, and then will be added to this list at that time.
All right. Anyone else?
Just one question.
Yeah.
I know, obviously, you said that parents can pull this list up, they can ask questions. Just, is it on the website? I'm just trying to understand, like, how a parent would ask where they could see what's happening within the classroom.
Yeah, the list will be posted on the website. If a parent wanted to review any materials, they could contact their child's teacher, the school principal, they could contact the district office, and would be directed then to the Department of Student Learning, where we'd set up a time for them to be able to come in and review the materials.
I'll also piggyback on that. Becky is working on, with the board's decision to now have a policy committee, Becky is working on enhancing that so it is even more clear for parents on what those steps would be.
Thank you, I just appreciate it. I just think that's a good idea to have to make sure.
Yeah.
All righty. Any other? All right. Thank you, Dr. Fitzpatrick. All right.
Thank you, Becky.
You're welcome. Do you mind if I stick around because I'll be a part of the one after? Okay.
Allison? Okay. Oh my gosh, no problem. So I was just saying, so you might wonder, what do teachers do to really get ready in their classrooms? So here we go. What do teachers do to get ready for a new school year? We untangle cords. Oh, so many cords to get our tech ready for all of our kids. It's a picture of our LMC at the moment. We pull out all our materials that had to be stored away all summer long. We put up new bulletin boards. We recruit family members to come in to help us. That's a picture of a dad and a daughter helping teachers at Windsor School get ready. The dad, by the way, put all those things up incorrectly, and the teacher had to redo it after he left. Just an FYI. We start lesson planning. We pick up materials waiting for us, workbooks, assignment, notebooks, and manipulatives, oh my, on the stage. We laminate, and then we spend hours cutting the laminated materials to hang up in our classrooms. We make copies, only responsibly. We don't waste any paper here in District 25. We organize materials. We love Amazon, and we are anxiously awaiting our packages of new markers, posters, and supplies that we use to teach. We collaborate. Those are some of our new teachers right there, as a matter of fact. We label desk tags. Sometimes we move rooms, and that's what it looks like before we get into our new classroom, an entire classroom in boxes waiting for us in the hallway. We create new schedules. And we cannot forget our amazing maintenance staff who are doing last-minute cleaning and adjustments in our classrooms to make our year fantastic. All of this, plus so much more, goes into making our schools and our spaces welcoming and ready for a new school year. And the teachers here in District 225 will be ready next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was worth the wait, absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Are we still on student services? Now I'm starting to
We are on business and
lose
finance
track. Oh,
now.
business and finance, yes. Esser Fund, Is this a action item? No, info item. Is this Stacy?
Stacy and Becky.
And
are doing
Becky,
this.
all right.
So Becky and I wanted to just provide the board with an Esser funding update, specifically because if you recall when the Esser 3 ARP funds were allocated, that application required board approval initially, while the other Esser funds did not. However, because we are now a year and 13 months into this, we do have some amendments that we're going to be making, but because the original application required board approval, we did want to bring it to the board to share it with you before we submitted those amendments.
Yeah, so some of this will just be kind of a reminder, some information we've shared with the board previously. And as Stacy said, we do have then some updates. So in terms of Esser funds in general, the rules on Esser funds, they're extensive, but just to kind of encapsulate, provide schools with funding to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the funds must be spent by 9/30/23, that was our Esser 2 funds, or by 9/30/24, those are our Esser 3 funds. Some considerations that we really thought about when making decisions about how to utilize this money. We talked about sustainability, knowing that these funds were only going to be time limited for 2 or 3 years. We also kept in mind challenges we were anticipating and now know about in terms of staffing and timing. Also systematic changes to better serve all students. We wanted to make sure that when thinking about any staffing costs from federal funds, we needed to make sure that we were including the salary for TRS, the additional percentage, and really generally to further invest in our high quality district staff. So making use of staff to execute some of these efforts. So in terms of Esser 1, these are items that you would have seen already. The spending has already taken place on these. These allocations were based on student enrollment, free and reduced lunch percentage for each school, and other informative data. We were strongly encouraged to explore using these funds to strengthen infrastructure for remote learning at that time, and they must provide supplemental educational services for eligible private school students. And I think Stacy's going to just give us a quick reminder on what those costs were.
Right, so at the time, this was when COVID initially hit and we were going into remote learning, we used the majority of these funds to expand our one-to-one technology down to the kindergarten level, as well as add some microphones and speakers to help with the remote learning, the Roomies and Zoomies at that time. And then the non-public share is the share that is the allocation for the private schools. They did not use all of their funds. They do have through September 30th of this year, 2022. So they have another 6-7 weeks to use their funds. However, they haven't been accessing them for this period of time, but those funds don't get turned back over to us.
In terms of our Esser 2 funds, those general rules are fairly similar. The major difference here being that there's no requirement for supplemental educational services for eligible private school students.
So in terms of the budget versus the actual for the Esser 2 funds, we had planned to hire the 4 additional interventionists district-wide using Esser 2 funds for the first year and Esser 3 funds for the remaining 2 years. What happened was our budget was based on our average, what we anticipate our average new hire cost is. However, when it came to these positions, all 4 positions were filled by more senior staff that already were teaching in the district. So the grant funds funded higher level of salaries, and then those positions that moved into these roles were filled then at those lower rates. But the grant funds did pay the higher level of costs here. Therefore, some of the literacy resources that we purchased, we did get everything we needed, but we shifted some of those to be purchased out of the Esser 3 funds in order to accommodate that within the budget of the Esser 2 funds. The first year of Summer U, last year, 2021, that we provided using grant funds was just slightly over our anticipated budget, and then our executive executive functioning PD was covered as well. And as Becky mentioned, those funds, at this point, we have filed our final claim and we are done with the ESSER 2 grant funds.
Which then really brings us to ESSER 3, where we, again, have shared some of these items, but are providing an update, trying to be responsive to the current needs that we're seeing. Those funds became available to us back in '21. The rules are 20% of those funds are to address learning loss. So we've attached certain activities and efforts to that. That includes social, emotional, and academic evidence-based interventions, which you'll hear a little bit about in a minute, and also to address the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on underrepresented student populations or subgroups. Those remaining funds then outside of that 20% could be used for a wide range of activities to address needs arising from the coronavirus pandemic. Here again, no requirement for the eligible private school students. And the ESSER 3 set aside that was provided was an additional $136,027, and you can see the breakdown of how they not advised us, but required us to do that spending. And Stacy's going to again take us through those expenditures.
So as Becky mentioned, these dollars are here really through September 30th of up to the last date of September 30th of '24. So as I mentioned earlier, we anticipated covering those intervention positions for the second 2 years. So for this school year we're about to start, as well as next year we'll continue to cover those intervention positions. Summer U was covered again this summer out of ESSER 3 funds. The tutoring program that we initiated last year, we spent significantly less on that than that we had budgeted for. We had actually budgeted for all of our non-special ed students, 15% of that population to basically get what's equivalent to a Tier 2 intervention, which is about 9 hours a week. So 15% of our kids getting 9 hours a week to allow for as much as needed was possible. But just our participation was significantly lower than that. And I don't know if you have any additional information on why that was.
Yeah, no, I think we shared this back in the spring, and obviously there hasn't been a change to the numbers participating since that time. But we did get feedback from our families that tutoring offering after school isn't always convenient for our families who have other activities that their children are engaged in. So there were a lot of efforts made to engage as many students as possible, and a lot of flexibility was shown on the part of our staff to try and meet the needs and the scheduling needs of our community members. So that was really kind of feedback that we were getting from our families about the provision of service. So I think, as I mentioned at the spring board meeting, really we're then focusing our efforts on, what is the most impact that we can have during the school day.
As I mentioned earlier, the literacy resources, we did spend more than budget here because we covered what we couldn't cover out of ESSER 2. We are anticipating spending some more dollars on professional learning in this upcoming school year for our staff. We spent over budget on the additional math resources and plan to renew all of our math manipulatives for this school year out of these funds. That's a change we're making. The social emotional learning facilitator positions for 3 years have always been a part of this plan here. We had budgeted dollars to cover some guest teachers to support our remote academy, and that came in under budget for last year. And then these last couple things are also additions that didn't exist in the original plan because we have dollars remaining still. First, the contract for some achievement gap and growth analysis consulting to help our administrators take a look at student data, look at growth and gap analysis. There was a presentation recently at a board meeting about that, and then work on that at the school level with their staff. as well as some curriculum and instruction projects that we look to have, be able to pay staff to complete, because some things we weren't able to get done last year because we couldn't pull staff out of classrooms due to sub-issues. And then just to add that remaining balance to help support our one-to-one technology initiative, to help support the cost of some of the Chromebooks we're purchasing this year with those remaining funds. The original budget was based on the original allocation without the set-aside, they call it, and then the new dollar amount includes that $136,000 set-aside.
So really, in summary, as we sought to meet the requirements of the Esser funding, as we gathered information about the needs of our students, as we analyzed the growth of our students, and hopefully looking for opportunities to accelerate their growth, really we feel like most of our efforts were focused in these areas, both summer U and intervention as direct services, the tutoring that we mentioned, the expanding, maintaining the one-to-one technology, literacy and math have really been our content areas of focus. We've talked at a number of board meetings now about the importance of the professional learning coupled with those additional materials. And then again, the certified staff support for the remote academy.
So as I said when I started, we just wanted to update the board on our plan. We would plan to submit this new amendment for the ESSER 3 funding. But again, while there's no requirement, we just felt because it originally did come to the board, we should bring it to you again before we made significant changes to it.
All right, thank you. Stacy and Becky, anyone have any comments or questions?
Yes, Greg. Oh, okay. I want to ask a question that is really just forward-looking and making sure I understand the process. So you mentioned that we're using those funds to support 4 interventionists for the next 2 years. And my assumption, but I want to clarify here, as we move toward the end of those 2 years and refine, either interventionists, we need to keep them, or we think that's something we would hear about in a personnel update, I imagine. Would that be correct?
That's exactly correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no other lights, let's move on to, we have an action item for the Consolidated District Plan.
Mr. Vice President.
Yes, Greg.
I move that the Board of Education approve the Consolidated District Plan for fiscal year 2022-23 as presented.
Thank you, Greg. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Rich. This is Stacy.
This is an annual plan that we bring to the board. It is a consolidated plan for all of our federal grants, including Title I, Title II, Title IV, Title III, which is our language instruction educational program, and then our IDEA Part B flow-through special ed, and our IDEA pre-K special ed grants. Approval of the plan is really just a procedural requirement. We are required to present it to the board and indicate the date that it was done so in submission of the plan, but it doesn't change it's not the actual application for any of the dollars that comes following the submission of this plan.
All right, so any questions on the submission of said plan, even though we'll see the plan later? This is the part I love. Okay. Madam Secretary, can you note the vote?
Member Cherniglia?
Yes.
Member Scapalato?
Yes.
Member Philippek?
Yes.
Member Faso?
Yes.
Member Conley?
Yes.
Member Oliniechek?
Yes.
All right, thank you. On to the presentation of the tentative budget. Back to Stacy.
Thank you. As Board Member Cerniglia just indicated, tonight I have the presentation of the 2022-23 tentative budget. In regards to the assumptions made in this budget, on the revenue side for property taxes, CPI is 1.4% on the most recent levy and 5% for the 2022 levy. There's nothing at this time included in this tentative budget for taxes on any referendum bonds. We project a 99% collection rate based on past experience of our taxes, and there's always on an annual basis some adjustment for reallocation between funds. On the interest income side, pleased to see that with the increases in the federal funds rates, we are now earning in our investments up to 1.5% through the end of next June, which is up from 0.4% that was used in previous years. Local food service revenues will return. The federal government had funded all school lunches for the past year plus. So we will go back to our typical food service program, and we last year was the last year of any contracts we had with outside districts. So we are now strictly, we've ended all those contracts and just working within our own district. State funds, pretty stable, a slight increase in our EBF funds of $117,000. And on the federal fund side, we are still anticipating getting the Esser 3 reimbursement, some IDEA art funds, but seeing a significant decrease on the federal fund side from those national school lunch dollars that we had been previously getting. So on the revenue side, overall, you can see in the working cash fund, I have it circled there, that does anticipate bond proceeds in the amount of $60 million for this fiscal year, anticipating a referendum bond sale of $60 million in that fund. If you take out, excluding that bond sale, total revenue budget increases about 1.17% overall. You can see just a couple things to point out in the unaudited actual for this year. Our O&M fund, we received revenues in excess of budget of $1.4 million. That was CPPRT, Corporate Personal Property Replacement Tax funds. The state tells us what they anticipate we will be getting from those funds each year, and they distributed $1.4 million to the district in excess of what they had told us to anticipate. So that's what that amount is. And in addition, we haven't done the reallocation of the property tax revenues for 21-22 because we don't have those tax rates at this time. In addition, in the bond and interest fund, you can see that levy stays the same because there's no additional levy anticipated within this tentative budget. So overall, our total revenue budget increase is just over $1 million from last year's budget. In terms of kind of an analysis of where those dollars come from, that chart is on the board here. We do not anticipate continuing to see that large increase in CPPRT, so I do have it budgeted at the same level that it was for last year. This chart does not include the bond proceeds because obviously we had none last year. Interest income, you can see again, is up significantly, and that's a result of the rate increases I mentioned. Federal funds at the very bottom are down significantly. That is because of those national school lunch, federal lunch program costs. We got significant revenues. We got significant dollars through that program this past year. The state revenues are up. That is mainly due to our state transportation reimbursement because those revenue dollars are based on your prior year expenditures. So if you recall, 21-22, the dollars we got were for transportation costs in 2021. where we were remote part of the year and we didn't have significant as typical transportation costs, so our claim was lower, so our revenues were lower. We are back this year to, or 21-22, we were back to full busing, so our claim at the end of 21-22 that we'll get this year is a more typical year, and that's why those dollars are increasing again. And then the local revenue, that increase is mainly back from the fees for student lunches would fall in that category. Tuition is our summer school tuition, which we would anticipate going back for next summer. So we charge summer school tuition in the spring for next summer and anticipate that would not be covered under the grants, but would go back to being paid by families, as well as our EC program tuition. Major changes in the revenue budget, quite a few of them, but just a couple to highlight. You can see the second and third lines, the food service sales in about an increase of about $1 million, what we collect from student fees versus the federal program was reimbursed us at almost $2.4 million last year. Interest income, again, the bond proceeds, a lot of grant dollars, changes from Title I down to the IDEA ARP grants. Those are just based on either the allocations or the claims that we have left to file based on the funds that we'll continue to spend. The FEMA funds were for claims we submitted related to COVID that we did get some federal reimbursement for. And that is really the major changes in all of the revenue sources over the prior year budget. When you compare budget, the proposed budget to last year's budget, it's pretty similar. The biggest difference being in the federal revenue side, which goes from 7% last year back down to about 4%, which is more typical. And that's, again, those national school lunch dollars. On the expense side, our personnel plan that was approved in the spring is incorporated into this budget. The salaries are all based on the negotiated agreements or tied to the CPI. Our health insurance cost increase is capped at 6%. There's no pension shift at this point represented in this budget, and we are projected to see a slight decrease in our IMRF employer rate as of January 1st, 2023. Every attempt was made to keep the budget cost neutral. However, with the inflation increases we've seen, we did make some adjustments, some for utility costs, gas and electric, as projected by our Director of Facilities, as well as we did give a 5% materials increase to all the schools just to account for some of those inflationary increases. The new math curriculum adoption is in this budget, which is about $1 million, and that should cover the 6 years worth of materials for that program. Our tech plan is a little higher than a typical at $1.6 million because of the replacement of some one-to-one technology, as well as a lot of replacement of access points for our network, some of which were ordered last year out of last year's budget. That didn't come, so those funds are being carried over to support hopefully getting those this year. I do have a very limited budget, about $30,000 for any related COVID expenses as we continue to provide PPE as requested by staff. Materials, there's a significant decrease in our budget for actual food being food purchased, and then supplies for the lunch program, because again, when everybody ate free, we budgeted more, anticipating participation would be much greater. Now that we're going back to the paid program, we anticipate participation will go down from the level it was last year back to a more typical level. And then we did also see a 6% increase in the bus contract, and unfortunately got some taxi increases, one of which our companies went up 60% over last year. So we are making some changes and trying to shift some of our routes over to one of our used to be our lower company that's now 60% higher. We're moving some routes away from them now back to kind of the middle tier routes to try to save some money on that. The district does get about 80% of that reimbursed by the state for special ed transportation, but 20% is a cost to the district. We'll continue the district-wide vehicle replacement. There is carryover in here from last year. We had anticipated replacing their food service vans for about $140,000. They were ordered. They don't have them. We haven't seen them, so those funds are being carried over to next year, as well as I believe one of our facilities vehicles also hasn't been received yet. So not only will we hopefully get the one from last year in, but also the one that we would replace next year in as well. Insurance premiums in terms of liability, property, workers' comp insurance increases are incorporated into here as well. For capital projects, this summer, projects total about $5.3 million is the budget. Plus, we've added about $3.9 million for the initial costs related to full-day kindergarten in terms of the design costs and maybe some early construction costs, assuming construction could start prior to the end of this school year. Again, debt service on bonds. The existing bonds is in the budget, but there's nothing at this point for any referendum bonds. And then, as always, contingency funds, should we find ourselves needing to hire any staff as kids start showing up and realizing they didn't enroll, or we get move-ins or whatever, that we have the dollars to cover additional staff to cover, service those students. So based on that, overall, across all funds, our total budgeted increase is 7.9%, with the majority of that being in our capital projects fund, with the anticipated summer projects plus additional design costs. The bond proceeds, while we would expect them, at least that initial sale, to be received this year, the majority of the costs associated with that, because construction wouldn't start till at least late next spring, those costs will be incurred probably June or after July 1, which is next fiscal year, which is why you don't see them in this year's budget. Again, the transportation fund is of note with the increase in the budget, but I mentioned the significant transportation increases that we're seeing. Our IMRF FICA budget will go down because of that projected rate decrease in January of 2023. And then we continue to anticipate about 60,000 of our work would truly be covered under our 10-year life safety survey, versus just under typical capital projects. Breaking it down another way, this chart kind of shows you the analysis of the different types of expenditures. If you take out, as I mentioned, that increase in the capital projects, the total expense budget increased overall about 2%. And then the employee benefits line, that line item, as a reminder, includes everything from health, dental, vision, and life insurance, but also all the associated pension costs, IMRF, FICA, Medicare, and TRS. And then in terms of the breakdown of changes in the budget last year to this year, just some of the key things that I mentioned earlier, there's about $297,000 additional dollars budgeted in our tech budget this year. We had some things budgeted last year that are coming out. The curriculum budget, the Math in Focus, that 6-year program is in here. That's the additional $1 million. The decrease in the food service supplies, and then the carryover for the food service vans and equipment, as well as, trying to just see, oh, and the other big thing is the related transportation costs, as I mentioned. So looking at our budget in comparison to last year by object, including the debt and construction, because the capital projects, because they fluctuate so significantly year to year, really make your total budget percentages kind of skewed, which is what happens when you look at 59% of salaries versus 55% of salaries in this year's budget. So I always like to take out those capital projects and debt payments so that you truly see typical operating costs, and that's in the bottom chart there. So you can see about 78% of our budget does go to personnel costs, which is very typical in any school district. So in looking at fund balance, you can see here overall, this does reflect anticipating a sale of $60 million of bonds in the working cash fund, so that we would end the year with $109,000 in fund balance, of which about half of that, or just over half of that, would be those bond revenues that would turn around next year and be spent on those building additions. The transfers that you see from working cash, you see a transfer of $4.7 million to the operations and maintenance fund, but then $9 million from operations and maintenance to capital projects. That is because when I look at the 2021 actuals I mentioned earlier, we had budgeted a deficit of $3.6 million. We came in with a surplus of 2.4. So it's about a $6 million swing. A lot of that is from, we did have a lot of salary dollars we didn't spend because we couldn't get subs, some positions we couldn't fill. So the salary and benefits that are associated with those went unspent. We deferred, we spent a lot less of our capital project, over $1 million less, 1.2 million of capital projects less in 21-22 than we budgeted for, some of which are deferred because we just couldn't get them done this year for a variety of reasons, supply chain issues and labor issues. We got the additional 1.4 in revenue in the CPPRT side that was unexpected. We had about $500,000 less in special ed tuition than we had anticipated, and then we spent, as I said, we had budgeted high on the food service supply side because we didn't know participation, and we had about $680,000 less in supplies than we budgeted for. So those are some of the things that caused that big swing. So I'm recommending not to use $9 million of bond proceeds to cover the capital projects for this year, but instead use some of that surplus we gained from last year to cover about half of those capital projects this year. Thus the difference between the $9.2 million in projects, but only the $4.7 million transfer. And then this just kind of shows you in a different way, hopefully, what I was trying to say clearly. So if you look at the budget impact, 60 million of our fund balance would be from bond revenue. We're spending or transferring to cover 4.7 of capital projects from that bond revenue, which leaves a quote-unquote surplus from bonds of 55.2 million. Our total budget surplus, as you saw on the last slide, was 50.3 million, which means our actual budget deficit is about 4.95. So out of that 6 million we gained last year, I'm recommending we spend almost 5 of it, knowing that some of those projects are deferred and will still be coming, is why I didn't recommend spending that full 6. And then just the budget timeline. We'll continue to look and make budget changes as we move forward, mainly at this point related to any final grant allocations, updates that we get from federal and state government, as well as all of, unfortunately, we're still seeing a lot of staffing changes, so all of those as they happen will get incorporated into the final budget. with the final, with the budget hearing and final budget adoption on September 27th. The tentative budget, this presentation, as well as the budget book you have, as well as the legal budget will all be posted on the website tomorrow for public access, as well as they're available at this point in board docs, and will be there for 30 days, as well as the notice of the public hearing and budget adoption going in 30 days prior to the September 27th. And that's it.
All right. Any comments or questions on the budget? Great.
Mr. Vice President. All right, so Stacy, I'm going to ask a question, and then please help me with any misunderstandings I have. And then, so we can go all the way back to slide 3. I'll just use that because that's maybe the place I would look at it. I read a report or an analysis that said at the current rate, the way the state legislature is funding EBF, it might take 20 years to be fully funded. So my question to you, if I didn't misunderstand that piece, as the state legislature or that gets closer to being fully funded, do we see more money as it's funded, or is it what we get is just what we get?
Right, so we're a tier 3 district, so what we get is what we get. The additional revenues that go into the EBF formula that's not fully funded are ultimately for tier 1 districts, which are very low local property wealth districts, and then tier 2 districts, and then if there's anything left, I think they say like 1%, a very small portion would be dedicated towards tier 3, maybe tier 4 districts, but then split up against all of them. So 98% of any full funding of this formula would go to tier 1 and tier 2 districts.
All right, any other comments or questions? All right, thank you. All right, now we're on to the proposed referendum of the bond sale presentation.
As we move forward, if I could just remind the board, later in the meeting, we do have a topic on just the general referendum steps and what's coming. These next 2 items are more specific, the first, but do relate to that referendum. The first one being an information item, and the next one being the first action item that the board would be asked to vote on.
Sit here or there?
Wherever you're comfortable.
You could sit.
I always give paper, even though I don't want to kill trees. It's nice to have something to write on.
Do you want me to say something? So tonight, Liz Hennessy from Raymond James is here to just present the board with some information regarding the possible bond sale that we would be looking at, as indicated in your packet, in analysis with both our Director of Facilities and then working through some scenarios with Liz. And based on the fact that the bond proceeds must be spent within 3 years following the sale, knowing that the bonds are intended to cover 5 years worth of capital projects, and knowing the capital projects, to the extent that it makes sense, will be scheduled with building additions for full-day kindergarten, but then ones that can remain more sensible on their own or in buildings that they're not due up for into the year 4 or 5 would remain out there. And then knowing, as we'll ask you to approve one now, but then also in the future, we have the ability to do a resolution to reimburse. So if for some reason we did get to a point where we spent the full 60 before we issued any additional bonds, we could do a resolution to reimburse out of those additional bonds for dollars spent up to 60 days prior to the sale of those bonds. So based on that, Liz is here to kind of present the option that we would likely recommend to the board for the sale of bonds.
Okay, I'll speak louder. All right, so I'm going to start with a market update. Wait, here we go. This graph represents our tax-exempt municipal market data index going back to January of 2019. We saw interest rates go up once we realized we're in a pandemic. And bondholders were selling bonds rapidly because they thought issuers would default. The Fed stepped in and became the lender of last resort. Interest rates came down straight away within 2 weeks. We hit an all-time low in interest rates in August of 2020, and we're really in a very stable interest rate market until recently, with December and January this year, where we started to see some very strong inflation numbers, and the Fed, the markets anticipated the Fed raising rates, which they have and will continue to raise rates. So we've seen interest rates go up very rapidly, and in the last couple of weeks they've come down because market investors fear that with these rapid increases in interest rates, the Fed may cause a recession. So fears of recession are starting to creep in the market. And the good news, at least, is it's bringing rates down temporarily. We do have an inflation number coming out tomorrow, CPI. If it's high again, and we expect further Fed increases, so volatility will continue to be with us. But, you know, when we look at these rates, I do encourage you to look at the top rate on the page. It's 4%. These rates are under 3.5% for, you know, 20 and 30-year bonds. So we're still in a relatively low interest rate environment versus history. Here's just an outstanding debt service chart that looks at the district's 2 non-referendum, or actually 4 non-referendum bonds outstanding. The 15s and 16s will be repaid this year. The 17s and 18s are still outstanding. Those are non-referendum bonds. The district's debt limit is based on the equalized assessed value. This is a state requirement. It's 6.9% of the EAV. We don't yet know the 2021 EAV, given the delays at Cook County, but the debt limit is very large at the district, $145.9 million. You have $37.7 million out, so a net debt limit of $108 million. So, as Stacy mentioned, the district is looking at spending the $75 million bond referendum approved by the voters on capital projects over a 5-year period, starting this year through 2027. The full-day kindergarten additions will kick off, so programming will open in August of '24. The infrastructure improvements are life safety, HVAC, boilers, electrical, roofing, plumbing, security, paving, gym expansions at Westgate and Dryden to support building functionality, and the full-day kindergarten additions. When you issue bonds, you have to expect to spend at least 5% of those bond proceeds in the first 6 months and 85% of it within 3 years. So based on the construction schedule, the amount that we're able to issue this August is $60 million, with the remaining $15 million being issued in spring of 2025. So that conforms with those arbitrage requirements and the district's projected spending schedule. So here's a chart that shows the debt service on each of those bonds. The proposed $60 million referendum bond debt service repaid over 20 years with the $15 million coming in 2025. Gives you total debt service of $5.2 million. That's principal and interest payments over that 22-year time period. And these interest rates we're using are have large cushions in them because of the volatility we've seen in the bond market. So, you know, that is going to increase the tax rate by just under 25 cents, or for a $400,000 market value home, we're estimating $293 or so, based on these options, which again have those cushions. So things could change by the time we get to market, but this is our best estimate at the moment. This graphic, I think, shows it a little better. The green bars represent the payments on the $60 million of the bonds, and the blue bars represent the payments on the $15 million, how those two together make the total debt service schedule for the $75 million. Last slide is the timeline. On July 19th, the county clerk certified the election results. Tonight, we're discussing the financing plan, schedule, parameters resolution, and later on in the meeting, you'll be looking at the reimbursement resolution. So just to tell you a little bit about those two things, the reimbursement resolution allows the district to pay itself back for funds spent on capital projects associated that you will issue bonds in the future for. So you can go ahead with, you know, all the things that you spent money on for capital projects and pay yourself back. It's a nice thing to have, because if you don't have it, you cannot pay yourself back with bond proceeds. It's a federal tax law, and it just makes the district state its intent through that reimbursement resolution that if capital project monies are expended, you want the ability to pay yourself back with the proceeds of the bond. The other thing I want to mention is the parameters bond resolution. So we're going to look at presenting that to the board for approval on August 23rd, but you have a draft in your board packet tonight. And this parameters resolution authorizes the sale of up to $62 million of the bond proceeds. The intent is to get $60 million. These are outside parameters. We expect the bond sale to be under, you know, right around that $60 million. So the parameters resolution authorizes the board president and the assistant superintendent of business to approve the final sale of the bonds within the parameters set forth in this resolution. So this parameters has a maximum interest rate, has a maximum annual debt service, maximum principal amounts, but the maximum amount that could be issued is $62 million. So each section kind of goes through the various bond details, the authorization, the referendum, and the payment schedules. So this resolution, once approved, is the final legal action you would have to take to sell $60 million of the bonds. Okay, so this is a draft for your review, and happy to answer any questions tonight.
So that would be on the board agenda for the 23rd, so it's actually not in this packet. So
Oh, sorry.
they don't have it
I'm
yet.
sorry,
So
Stacy.
sorry.
Oh, you will have it soon. Tomorrow, we are meeting with Moody's Investor Service to discuss the district's bond rating and renew it for the $60 million issue. So Stacy's done a great job pulling information together. We have a beautiful PowerPoint that we're going to walk them through, and with hopes of renewing the district's AAA rating. The district is rated the highest possible bond rating available, the AAA, and I really don't have any qualms that you'll get that AAA rating again. August 19th is the end of the 30-day protest period. then the regular meeting August 23rd to approve the parameters bond resolution. Then we are planning to sell the bonds on August 30th. If all goes well in the market, we want to have the flexibility to move that date if we have a Fed meeting or something that would affect interest rates negatively, and then close the bond issue on September 22nd. That's when the district would receive the $60 million bond proceeds, and you would be able to reimburse at that time any district expenditures spent prior to that. So I'll pause there and see if you have any questions.
Questions and comments?
Just, Stacy, on that reimbursement of capital. So what, if I'm thinking of this right, it's either things that we would have incurred prior to September 20 or August 30th, right? So
Prior to September 22nd, when you
okay,
get the
all right,
money.
yeah. Prior to the close, okay, September 26th. That pushes back to July. So what capital expenditures would we be thinking to put into there?
So the capital expenditure budget for this year, so the summer of '22 costs, plus the design costs for full-day kindergarten and that total $9.2 million in the tentative budget. So we're starting with architects now for some of those design costs. So we would reimburse those as well as some of the capital projects we're doing right now. That's part of that 5-year plan.
So the key is they don't have to be incurred, they just have to be projected. Because otherwise...
The reimbursement resolution allows us to pay ourselves back for money we already spent, but once we get the bond proceeds, we can spend them on all costs covered under the purpose of selling the bond, so it can be future costs. The reimbursement resolution is only for costs incurred prior to the date you pass the resolution, correct?
Right, but in some of that, and again, it's probably just a mere technicality, but in that budget here, or in the budget that you just provided, we talked about the total of 9. Some of it will be into the future, because you don't have the resources, manpower, all those types of things. So it's really any of the things that were spent in the last 60 days, incurred since September 30th, so really in the last 30 days, right? Because you can only go after incurred for putting it in there.
Correct.
That's what I'm wondering is what type of capital things have we incurred to put into that, into the resolution? How much, roughly? Is it $1 million, $2 million, and then?
Oh, no, it's not that much at this point.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, is it?
Any other questions for Liz or Stacy? All right.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Liz. All right, we are on to item E, I believe, if I'm tracking here, which is a resolution to express our official intent regarding capital expenditures to be in reimbursement proceeds. And I would need a motion.
Mr. Vice President.
Yes, Greg.
I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution expressing official intent regarding certain capital expenditures to be reimbursed from proceeds of an obligation to be issued by the district.
Thank you, Greg. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Rich. Any context we haven't heard on that?
No, again, this resolution allows us to go back 60 days from this passage, but then also forward to the date we get the bond proceeds. So it's really covering us for any of the costs we incur prior to the date we close and get the bond proceeds, which mostly will be the design costs related to civil engineering, and architect fees related to the building additions.
Possibly project management, I assume, too, right? All right. Lana, take us through a vote.
Member Scapalato?
Yes.
Member Philippek? Member Faso?
Yes.
Member Conley?
Yes.
Member Oliniechek?
Yes.
Member Cherniglia?
Yes. All right.
Now it works.
Let's move on. Oh, crossing guard locations. This is also an action item, so I need a motion.
Mr. Vice President,
Yes, Greg?
I move that the Board of Education approve crossing guard locations as presented for the 2022-23 school year.
Thank you, Greg. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Scott. Any crossing guard details, Stacy?
Again, we do this every year. We meet with our school resource officers from the village, since the village ultimately does reimburse us for all the costs associated with crossing guards, to establish whether any new locations are needed, whether any of them no longer require crossing guards due to maybe new signage. And then, unfortunately, mainly to determine that if we're unable to staff the locations, which ones we would agree in recommending aren't staffed for the upcoming year. So the change for this year, because we are short in people wanting to do these jobs, it is a half hour before school starts and then a half hour after school starts. So they're typically positions that somebody maybe who lives right around the stop is willing to do. They're not typically locations people are going to drive to work for a half hour and then drive home. And they coincide with parents trying to get their kids to school, so it makes it difficult for our families to cover them as well. So if there's anybody out there in the community that is interested in a crossing guard position, we'd love to have you. But otherwise, we would look at eliminating the crossing guard position at the location of Maud and Patton up in the Patton school community for this year because we're unable to staff it.
All right, well, let's take it to a vote. Oh, sorry, any questions?
Stacey, just a quick question. I know we had talked before about Thomas and Belmont, about either something with the village or the state to do something about that intersection. Is there any update there?
Actually, or Ryan, I think, is here. Ryan, are you here? Did you hear the question?
So before we had talked about Belmont and Thomas, that intersection right at that corner, and I know we had some conversations with the village or state or something about that. I was just wondering if there was any update.
The update is that we decided at this point not to proceed with that project just based on the orientation of that intersection. We've had past conversations with our traffic engineer. They weren't 100% on board with the rapid beacon that would be going in there, but it's always an option. We're going to look at it again once school starts back up and determine if there's a future project there. Again, since it's our issuance that we'd be looking to implement it, it'd be our cost to start with for implementation, and then any recurring maintenance would be turned over to the county. So again, if they put it at Hersey or some other ones, they warrant the initial cost, and then the county will take over any future maintenance on those.
I think part of our follow-up concern, because we looked at that not too long ago, the traffic engineer, was the age of our kids. The confusion, so if you those of you that know the Hersey light, high school students can push a button, it flashes and notifies the traffic that's going two ways to stop, and the high schoolers can walk by. The Thomas and Belmont is a four-way, and with the age of our students, we do have a crossing guard there, and we worry that our students would see that flashing light and not pay attention to the crossing guard, or would come at a time that a crossing guard's not there, and they would think they could run across safely. And so the more we looked at it, the more we felt that wasn't going to be our answer yet.
Mr. Vice President, just a quick question. Stacy, so as positions are shifted or eliminated, do they stay open? So if someone came to the district later in the year and said, oh yeah, I could do this, those are it's still possible, right? They're not like off the table.
Absolutely. I mean, at this point, we have not even any applications for the positions, but certainly if people did apply and we could hire them, then we would go back and fill. We do budget the full amount of dollars allocated from the village on both the expense and revenue sides, so that if that were to happen, we could cover those costs and get that reimbursement.
All right, Lana, take us through a vote.
Member Scapalato?
Yes.
Member Philippek?
Yes.
Member Faso?
Yes.
Member Conley?
Yes.
Member Oliniechek?
Yes.
Member Cherniglia?
Yes. All right, moving on to item G, serious safety hazard resolution. It's an action item. I would need a motion.
Mr. Vice President,
Yes, Greg.
I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution to continue serious safety hazard busing for the 2022-23 school year.
Thank you. Do I have
I'll
a
second.
Thank you, Scott. This is Stacy. Who is this?
Again, this is an annual item that we need to approve so that we can file for the state for reimbursement of our transportation costs for serious safety hazard busing.
All right, any serious safety hazard questions or comments? Pretty typical. Lana, take us to a vote, please.
Member Philippek?
Yes.
Member Faso?
Yes.
Member Conley?
Yes.
Member Oliniechek?
Yes.
Member Cherniglia?
Yes.
Member Scapalato?
Yes.
All right, on to item, oh, we're done. We on to item 11. Oh, facilities management, Ryan, traffic study, also an action item. I would need a motion.
Mr. Vice President,
Yes, Greg?
I move that the Board of Education award traffic and parking studies to Erickson Engineering in the amount of $58,900 for 6 elementary school additions.
All right, thank you, Greg. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Rich.
And as Ryan talks about this, I'll just highlight again, as the board's aware, this is, again, a referendum-related action item to do the traffic studies we'd need prior to doing any additions. An incurred cost.
Part of your
Got it.
question, right?
It's coming full circle.
Yes, so good evening. This is the traffic study that is required for the Village of Arlington Heights for the zoning and planning commissions that we'll be going through in the future for the addition projects. Again, Erickson Engineering is our current civil engineer for the district and have done all our traffic studies in the past, so they're very familiar with all of our sites. So looking to get them going on these studies in September, October, when school gets back into session. We have adequate traffic data then during that time to get this ready for the village portion. So again, the proposal is $58,900 that will be billed on an hourly basis not to exceed. So again, if they do come in under that, we will be billed less for the proposal than the proposed amount. They will be reviewing existing parking sizing, past and future enrollment, number of buses, number of taxis, school traffic maps, village traffic maps, field visits, drone footage. There's a whole encompassing amount of information that we will be putting together with this. So initially, to approve this tonight, we'll be just getting them some more information to get ready for the traffic studies in September and October. There's a number of data sheets and information that they want to get ready into their for their final report. So we'd like to get that to them sooner or later so they can start looking, asking any questions that they may have, so we can have an initial kickoff meeting with each of the schools, and then we can really start digging into it after the bond proceeds are issued. So again, looking to get these going, again, a requirement of the village for our approval processes. The last ones that we've done, the drone footage has been huge. That's one of the expenses that we're recommending in this, is doing the drone footage because it really tells the story of what's going on with traffic. It's hard to relay that on a sheet of paper or in a spreadsheet. So by putting that up there, showing some small clips of traffic around a specific school, it really helps tell the story of what's going on for short periods of time at our building. So looking to get this started. Again, the majority of the project will not be started until after bond proceeds are issued. So looking to get this approved tonight.
All right, any questions or comments?
Perhaps one of the engineers can stand post at Maud and Patton for crossing guard.
There you go. While they're flying the drone, they can cross a couple kids, kill two birds.
We'll see if they put the vest on. And
Hopefully they'll
they're
kill any
willing to
birds.
volunteer for that.
All right. Lana, take us through a vote, please.
Member Faso?
Yes.
Member Conley?
Yes.
Member Oliniechek?
Yes.
Member Cherniglia?
Yes.
Member Scapalato?
Yes.
Member Philippek?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Ryan? No update from personnel and planning. Let's move on to item number 13, the superintendent's report, beginning with a FOIA Act update.
Thank you. As we do at each meeting, you have a list of the FOIAs that we received and have responded to. Since we didn't have a July meeting, these go back a little further.
All right, next item is a referendum review. Dr. Mai.
Thank you. The board has in its packet the official certificate of results from the Cook County Clerk's Office for the suburban Cook County election results, in which our Cook County Clerk notes that there being more yes votes than no votes, the referendum succeeds. Below is the abstract of votes by precinct, the total number of votes on the referendum question being 10,404, with 5,227 being yes votes, 5,177 being no votes. And then again, the Cook County Clerk in the official certificate breaks it down by precincts as well. As the board is aware, we had the unique experience, maybe becoming more common in our lifetime, where we didn't have the final results on election day. At the end of that day, on election day, the county reported that there were 4 of the 38 precincts that had not reported results. At the end of the following day, the clerk's office did verify that all votes cast on election day had been counted. However, they notified us that they update the information with early voting ballots and mail-in ballots after the closing of election day. So we did wait not only for and watch those daily updates, but until the official certified results on July 19th. So next steps, the board, this will come in front of the board almost every meeting moving forward over the next 5 years. And so you will be well informed, as will the public, of each step of the process, and we'll need to approve expenditures, everything related to the sale of the bonds, the construction projects, et cetera. You heard from Elizabeth Hennessy tonight. We'll begin working more with the architects to get into the detailed phase of design and engineering. We've had a preliminary meeting with the village, but we'll start that formal process, and the village will have a timeline that we'll need to adhere to in terms of approval of plans, going through each of the Plan Commission, Design Commission, before it goes to the trustees for actual approval, each step along the way. We'll be coming back to the board. These firms are still reviewing these contracts, but likely at the next meeting with an extension of the contract for our construction management company, an extension of the contract with our architects, and an extension of a contract with our engineering firm. And Elizabeth reviewed some of the timeline to be aware of, but to reiterate and expand a little bit, it would be the August 23rd meeting we would be bringing those documents to the board to approve that initial sale of bonds of $60 million. And then throughout the fall and winter, doing all the design, approval, permit process, the bidding phases, all of that again that will come to the board along the way. Our staff, under the leadership of Becky Fitzpatrick, will begin the more detailed design of a kindergarten program for a full day and what that will entail. We expect that in the spring of '23, we will begin construction, and we're looking at doing that in a phased approach right now, looking at starting 3 of the schools and then 3 others later, but we're working on the details of that to bring to you. By December of 2023, so just over a year from now, we plan to bring a full-day kindergarten programming presentation to the board. So basically the instructional aspect of everything, what will occur in the classroom, what parents would be able to expect to have their kids experience in full-day kindergarten. So that by January of '24, families that would register for the 24-25 school year, right? So for the following August, so in January of '24, for kids that would start in August, parents would know as they start to register and pick up information what full-day kindergarten would look like for their students who would start in August of '24. We will, again, talk in more details about you with construction, but similar to like we did with our previous additions, construction that would be happening outside of the buildings. And then in the summers, winter breaks time, mostly in the summers, the connection would be made to the inside of the buildings. So construction would continue. I expect at this point, again, it's early, but I expect us to very likely be telling our staff that we would be closing schools once construction starts during spring break, during winter break, during summer break. And what I mean by that is that staff wouldn't be able to come in and access things throughout those times. But again, we'll put those schools' construction on a schedule so everybody's aware of that. We'll be bringing updates to the board, again, pretty much every meeting, with, again, the goal being of opening for full-day kindergarten in August of '24. Does anybody have any questions?
Mr. Vice President?
Good.
Dr. Bynum, I wouldn't be surprised if you have this in your plan, but just to ask, like you mentioned, there'll be planning meetings, planning commission meetings for the village, and then a final approval. And if you could keep us advised of, if we'd like to watch those meetings, particularly the final approval, that would be great.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bine. Item number C, pandemic-related procedures.
All right, let me get the control. So what I'll say as they get things loaded up is, for the most part, we're going to return to a very typical school year. We continue to see updates on pandemic requirements, guidance from the Illinois Department of Public Health, from the Illinois State Board of Education. So the thing for us all to remember that we've been trying to remember the last few years is flexibility. I'll tell you some things that when we wrote this report were definite requirements and now are turning to guidance. And we've all heard in the news as well that we believe the CDC is going to be announcing some step backs on guidance for schools as well. That could happen at any time. But here are the plans for District 25 for the 22-23 school year. Again, I will review with you things that are required by the Health Department or the State Board of Education. Those really relate to what we do if we have a positive case of COVID-19, and that school districts are required, turning to recommended, to offer a remote option based on a declaration by the state superintendent. So I'll talk about that. I'll also quickly highlight, again, there are a lot of recommendations of important health strategies from the Centers of Disease Control and the Illinois Department of Public Health, and some additional information that'll be important for our families to know. We do plan to send out all of this information as well as a letter with a variety of topics to our families this week, but we wanted to share it here at the board meeting first. Things that are required at this point, in District 25, we will move forward treating a positive case of COVID-19 like a typical absence, like any other absence that we have, except we will be isolating a positive case from school for 5 calendar days. So if someone begins symptoms on Wednesday, they're excluded Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and can return on day 6. We have a procedure in place where our nurses will notify families, as we did last year, here's your return date, and that's for students and for staff. Again, that 5 days is counted from the onset of symptoms or a positive test, whichever occurred first. So if I tested on Friday, but I think, wait, I really was seeing symptoms on Wednesday, we're going to start Wednesday as your count date. A family can use a home test or a lab test. Those are acceptable. They simply need to call and tell us my child is positive, or a staff member as well. We'll ask them to notify the absence line or the nurse for the reason of absence, and if that reason they give is a positive COVID case, again, our nurse will connect with them and make sure they understand their return to school date. We are returning to a more typical request for classwork process. So this is where it's treated like a typical absence. Like any other absence, a family can contact the teacher or the school and request their child's classwork beginning on their 3rd day of absence. So on the child's 3rd day absent from school, the parent can call and say, I'd like to pick up my child's work, and that work is available in the office after school. Some staff already have information on the website or will email to parents, but the minimum requirement from our staff will return to that, as it has been for all other illnesses, that they'll gather any work needed and have it available for the parent to pick up. The student would be required to submit any missed work that the teacher is assigning. That's different from last year. Last year we said if a child was absent from class, they didn't have to make up any of that work because they instead did work through the remote academy. This year, returning to a typical absence, the student would be required to return that work. And again, some classrooms already list that information on a learning platform or a teacher webpage. Each classroom shares that information with their families. Remote option. Districts are required to offer, but parents are not required to utilize. So this, by required, our state superintendent has made a declaration that school districts shall offer a remote option for any student who is absent due to COVID-19. So the way this will work this year is a little bit different. If a student has to be excluded for those 5 calendar days, we have an optional remote academy that parents can sign their child up so they're engaged with a certified teacher during their isolation. So if my child is positive but feeling well enough, I as a parent may say, well, I'd like him to be online engaging with a teacher in a remote academy. My child is still going to have the option to get all of their work from their regular class. And as a parent, I may say, oh, they're going to get their class from their regular work. I'm not going to put them online. Or I might say, they're going to get their regular work, but I'd still like them to be engaged online. They're feeling well enough, but I need to keep them home because they're positive. So we'll start the year with that being an optional service for families where a certified teacher will be available to work with children who choose to do that. We're creating grade spans, right? So kind of like we had last year, but 3 different grade spans this time, but that can fluctuate depending on the number of students. At this point, I don't expect that many families would take advantage of this. We know that our middle school students can access their work online right away. Because our elementary students wouldn't necessarily be able to access their classwork until the 3rd day of absence, right? They may want to be online interacting with the teacher during that time. So our grade spans may change depending on how many students we see taking advantage of it. But basically, it would be synchronous, so live with a certified teacher for a half a day, and the other half, they would have links and materials that they could work on asynchronously. Any work done in the academy program is not turned in. Again, it's just an extra opportunity for students to be engaging in learning if they have to be home with COVID. Let's see. Some recommended procedures. So the Department of Public Health, the CDC, the Cook County Health Department, ISB, the vast majority of things right now are recommended. And we will share a link on our website, but it's also readily available to families on the recommendations that the CDC and the Health Department provide for families if the community is in a low level of positive cases or in a medium level of of positive cases or in a high level of positive cases. Again, this is information that a family can use based on what's going on in suburban Cook, or even you can dial down online right into Arlington Heights. Additional information that our families will be interested in, some changes per recent updates from the health department. We will reach out to a family and communicate with them, of course, when they tell us that they have an individual case of COVID among their student. We will no longer provide letters to the entire community for every single case. We know that the health department is recommending that that is not something we need to do. In fact, the health department is reviewing their reporting procedures and should be telling us soon if we even need to report individual cases to the health department. So we'll work with an individual family, but you won't see the letters that we were sending out for every single case before. We're going to discontinue the dashboard that we had online, again at the guidance of in agreement with the health department, because the information that we would have is so incomplete. It would only be cases that parents are calling and notifying us about. Just like we know in our community, positive cases are for those who are reporting through a doctor or a hospital or a health, but not all the home positive cases that are occurring. So that data would be skewed and really not valid to rely on. Any testing of students would be facilitated by parents and guardians. So if a parent wants to verify if their student is positive or verify if their student has gotten to negative, that would all be done by them. And our daily cleaning will return to our high-touch surfaces unless we get to a point of an outbreak. We won't be doing the nightly static sprayer that we were doing. Again, we've discussed that with the health department. Our cleaning procedures are very sufficient. Flexibility will be important. Again, we will notify families if we see an outbreak that is definitely attributed to school. Last spring, as we talked with the health department, they worked really hard to say, do we think this is attributed to school, or is it definitely not attributed to school, or we're not sure if it could be attributed to school. And it was kind of a case-by-case basis where they'd be like, maybe we should report this as an outbreak, maybe we shouldn't. So we are going to continue to, anytime we have an outbreak, we still will need to contact the health department. An outbreak by the health department standards is still considered 3 positive cases in a class or in a group or on a team, or 10%. So if you have a class of 20 kids and 2 are positive, that's 10%. That would be an outbreak. We do have to report that to the health department. The health department would work with us and say, this is definitely school related, or we definitely can't rule that out, so notify your families, or no, as we trace these cases, it's very likely they're not related and caused or connected at school. If we, again, know that it is definitely connected at school, we would notify families of that. A person can, of course, wear an appropriate mask at any time. Just a reminder that our Illinois High School and Elementary School Association for Sports does have real particular safety rules on times that you can or cannot wear a mask, so we would need to adhere to any time we're participating in an IEA sporting event. But a student or a staff or a visitor, of course, welcome to wear a mask when they feel they need to do that. And a person may request an individual desk shield. So if a staff member still wants a desk shield, we have those available. If a student wants to request one for their desk at times that they're eating, we have those available and provide those as well. And as Stacy noted earlier, we do have PPE available for staff members who would request that moving forward. So really, in general, we're returning to a very typical school year with only 2 requirements at this point, and that is if someone notifies us that they are positive, that they be excluded from school for 5 days, and that if a student is excluded, that we are offering, based on the state superintendent's declaration, the option to participate in remote academy, although they will also have the opportunity to get their classwork as they do for any other illnesses. We'd like to see how that remote academy participation goes, and it may be something, if it's not something that people are participating in that we would phase out as we move forward. Are there any questions?
Mr. President.
Yes, Gina.
Dr. Biden, at the end of last year, we moved lunches back to normal and being in the lunchroom. Will that continue?
Yes, thank you. Every other procedure is back to pre-pandemic. So eating in the lunchroom, spacing, sitting next to kids, our lunchroom procedures and how we offer lunch, all of that returns to typical procedures.
All right, any other pandemic readiness questions? All right. What's that? Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
That would be great.
All right. Lana, do you have any other public comments? No? All right. Let's move on to future agenda items, topics with dates to be determined.
Sure. Typically, we'd ask that you fill out another blue sheet, but if we have... Okay. Would you like to... Would you like to raise your hand or would you want...
Thanks. Anita Pacheco, I appreciate you saying that you're going to be communicating out to your families as you start to put together your plans, your construction plans. How will you be reaching out to the residents that live near and around your buildings, being that those of us that live near your buildings really did not receive any communication, which you said was supposed to be hitting our homes, during the referendum campaign. So can you explain how will you be letting me know, just typical homeowner, around one of your schools? How will I know of street closures or like detours, or how will I know?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody has any specific questions as they arise, obviously, we're always can provide that. If you have specifics, you can email us or call us.
In general, all the information will be available here, and like we did in other editions, any homes connected to or what congruent to construction projects, we hand out letters to each home individually. But we'll also, all of that information will be here at board meetings, so you can see all of that information publicly as well.
So when you say hand out letters?
We have hand delivered when we've done construction projects. By law, we have to notify homes within 250 feet of those projects.
And put a sign up, public hearing for the plan commission and the design commission.
So you'll see those signs at those construction sites, and we either mail or hand deliver, depending on the timing, to those homes that we're required to within that boundary.
I would just ask if you can just step up that effort, because you said you hand delivered or mailed communications to homes with regard to the referendum twice, and many of us did not receive those. So you may want to just look into that. Thank you.
Again, Joanne Carroll, lifetime resident of Arlington Heights. And Lori, did you have any intention with the board to go in down the hallway and listen to any of our comments, suggestions, constructive criticism at all? This was a done deal.
Again, in our public comments, we don't typically engage in dialogue, so if you'd like to talk offline with any of us or individually, we can do that, but this portion of the meeting is just for you to present and share your feelings, so this isn't intended to be a two-way dialogue, so thank you.
I'm not done yet. You are all so, God love you if you all can walk out of here tonight and look at the residents, al fresco, parents, schools, because this was a generational 50% vote, like I've talked about. Had we won, the no vote won, we'd be back in November for you guys to get whatever the hell you wanted. And we're not even going to get a chance for you guys to go behind closed doors for a week. Call a special session, have Dr. Joji here, have her listen to all of our concerns. And, hey guys, where can we cut it? What can we do? Brian, go ahead. You were big in the paper. You had grave concerns. Very much so. Go ahead. That minute and 50 seconds. I'd like to hear something, okay?
I'm sure you would. This is
I
a
mean,
two-way
come on,
dialogue.
guys.
I mean, I'm not sure what you're looking for, but if you'd like a two-way dialogue, we can probably look to accommodate that. But again, I'm not going to engage in one now. It's not the intent of this meeting.
I can't invite all these people to come back for a two-way dialogue or a eight-way dialogue, you guys. Talk to us. We're over 21. We know the game. We've all lived in Chicago.
Well, again.
And now it's here in Arlington Heights. What a flippin' shame.
Put the decision in the hands of the voters.
You should all be
as I
ashamed of
stated.
yourself. And good luck at some of you guys getting reelected. And Laura, you'll probably be at a different school district by the time all these goddamn schools are built.
All right, thank you for your
Typically,
time.
you move on,
Thank you
don't
for your
you?
time.
William Boudreau, 827 South Roosevelt. To echo a little bit of what the prior speaker said, this is a fait accompli. I thought that the referendum gave you the authority to go forward if you chose to go forward. With the vote the way it was so close, I thought you guys would be reconsidering whether or not this should or should not be done. The fact that you can do it, you have the authority to do it, doesn't mean you should do it. So that was sort of the thing that maybe I'm a little naive. The other thing is it's very difficult to try to get any information in a cohesive fashion in this particular village because you've got to go to District 25, you got to go to District 214, you got to go to the Police Retirement Board, the Fire Retirement Board, the Village Board. And we, the taxpayers, are thinking that you folks are at least taking into consideration what's in the best interest of the taxpayers of this village. My property bill has gone up in 20 years I've been here, more than doubled. I wish my income had more than doubled. In fact, it's now probably 50% of what it once was because I'm now retired. I went up and down my street, and I've got the 700 and 800 block of Roosevelt. We're right one block over from Dryden. And I was trying to figure out how many families on this street right now will be using all-day kindergarten a year from now. I think over 40 or 50 homes that I counted. There may be one right now. And there was two, but that young family moved out the other day because they were renting a house. Probably couldn't afford the rent. So that's the disappointment. And I'll tell you, trying to come and to do all this stuff is a full-time job to try to get information. And it's sad to see that this is the way that the local folks who get elected to represent the taxpayers sort of treat the taxpayers. I went to the village board and I spoke just before COVID hit, and the affordable housing ordinance was up. It passed 7-0 unanimously. The issue was, is it necessary? Arlington Heights has 19% of the housing is considered by the state to be affordable. I still got a minute, okay? So we're at almost 20%. We're double almost what the 10% that the state wants. So my question to the village board was, why are you doing this? Why are you going to tie the hands of future boards and future village presidents by passing an ordinance that isn't needed? And right now, this all-day kindergarten is not needed. It seems like all of the kids who've gone through the school, District 25, District 214, have done quite well over the last 30 or 40 years with half-day kindergarten. And so I thought coming here tonight, maybe you folks would go into private session and maybe reconsider this. Yes, you've been authorized by, it's interesting, there were 10,630 ballots cast, but only 10,400 and whatever the number is. So there's 250 ballots that somehow weren't counted on this particular issue. So you really got less than 50% of the votes cast. So I don't understand that, but it's disappointing that the president isn't here. But I think you should really reconsider this and do thumbs up, thumbs down. And I'm not necessarily sure that you're going to be able to sell all the bonds. And it's interesting, 60 million, you guys are going to be up to well over 50% of your quote-unquote ability to get your debt level. And that's kind of outrageous, but that's just me.
All right, anyone else?
Sheila Cruz. I don't have a kid in District 25, but I am interested in reviewing the curriculum. Something Becky said earlier about parents being able to dial in. How can I get to look at the curriculum as a taxpayer? Email Dr. Fitzpatrick at sd25.org. Okay, that would be good. Thank you.
Sir.
Art Ellingson. Once upon a time in this village, a lot of the village boards would have things that they called a committee of the whole meeting. And I don't know if they've had committee of the whole meetings with District 25 recently. I haven't noticed them if there have been. I know last fall I was frustrated because District 214 and District 25 were meeting on the same nights. And I know that's been fixed, and I appreciate that. Which is why you'll see probably more of me going forward. But having those types of dialogue meetings is important to keep in touch with the community. Another idea for you is to have an email list, because emails goes out faster than snail mail. I was invited to attend an event up in the Abbey recently with Senator Johnson from Wisconsin. The postmark on the envelope from Chicago was the 18th of July. The event was on the 3rd of August. I got the snail mail that invited me to attend the event on the 5th of August. It took 2.5 weeks from downtown Chicago all the way to Arlington Heights. That's one of the problems with communicating by snail mail these days. It's why we call it snail mail. We tease the post office by telling them that, look, you raised postage rates recently 3 cents a day, 3 cents a letter, a penny a day for storage. Email is faster, it's more efficient, it's less expensive, it gets lost less. I would urge you to spend a little bit of effort putting together an email list so people can opt into an email list to know what's going on near a given school. So if you live near Westgate, you can get on the Westgate email list to know what's going on with school closures and street closures and so forth. And maybe you have one for every school, maybe you have one list for the whole district. But I urge you to use these facilities to communicate with the community better than you have in the past. And the question I'm wondering, and everybody's not asked this question yet, but this is a question that is the 800-pound elephant in the room, is what if nobody wants to buy your bonds?
All right, any other comments? Sure.
The referendum passed. It's gone, it's done. But I'm looking back at the process, and it appears as if the board was bitten by the bug. You had calamities that came in. You hired a firm to do outside interviews. It told you nothing. You spent your money. Why didn't you use it? Something that looked at Arlington residents as opposed to an outside firm. Told you what you wanted. But then you went from 60 to 75 million. And the 15 million was for the construction. That didn't even cause you to blink. If you had your own business and you were going to buy something, and someone came back and said, oh, it's going to be 50% more, what do? Okay, I'll take it. But you didn't stop and think. You just kept on going. I guess my concern is, where's the open-minded people that were elected? All of you were. But it's like you were going to trance with this. What would have stopped you from pushing this? Would it have to take 100 million? Or was it, damn the money, just pass the referendum? And you're doing this for 5-year-olds. 5-year-olds. And the whole village will be paying for this. Sorry. I don't agree, but it passed. And you're going to do what you're going to do.
All right. On to item 15, future agenda items, topics with dates to be determined.
I think anything that's been brought up in the last several months has been added to the attachment timeline.
Okay. Anyone have any comments or questions on the board topic list?
Dr. Bine, Mr. President, Dr. Bine, do we have a school safety with our SROs that we're going to present? Was that?
Yes, thank you, yeah. Thank you, yes, that may not be on there. We are meeting with them this week in hopes of doing a presentation for the board in September.
All right.
I do have a question, sorry, Dr.
Oh, sure.
Bynum and Brian. With all the changes, I know there's some conversation tonight with the comments from the public and everything about the sex education program. I know parents can opt out, but is there a more robust information that can provide to the board of just the overall, like what the changes are? I know we've had a talk about it previously, but I feel like we need more detail around, because I know we're getting a ton of public comments and we have a bunch of emails, but I do think it's something that we should at least see from our own perspective of what it is and what it curtails. Because, I know we approved technically the curriculum, but it would be nice to just understand what it really is and everything from my perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a letter, part of that will be one of the topics in the letter that goes to our community, our families this week, and just in general, so the board knows and our families know there is nothing changing in District 25 curriculum. We have a reproductive health and sex education program respectively at 5th grade and at 8th grade. It's a unit. It's 2 units at 5th grade. It's 1 unit at 8th grade. We contract out gender health. So we have a third-party purchased program for those. We'll provide the exact same programs that we provided last year. And like we always have, 5th grade and 8th grade families will get access to a presentation. Well, they will see the exact slides, hear the exact information that's presented, and see the exact materials before that is provided to students. And at that time, maybe we can look and see if we can earlier get contract with that, so we don't have access to it all the time. But we can also provide the board a general understanding of what that is. And again, so the board knows, and it'll be in our letter for our community, everything is exactly the same, kindergarten through 8th grade for this school year as it was. Health standards have been adopted by the state. If you use that information, you have to align with the national health standards. We are already aligned at 5th and 8th grade with the national health standards, and we're not implementing any of the curriculum, any of the other grades, so we don't have to do anything different there.
And finally, any other new topics? fire closed agenda. Been a while.
Yeah.
We don't have to go back into close. So I would need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Rich. Second.
No, second.
Second.
Scott, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.